Thank you very much, everybody, and dear President and members of the Belgrade Forum. It's an honor for me to be here, to be invited here to share with you information I have gathered over the years and to gather information from fellow participants today at this most important conference. My paper, War on Syria, Built on Lies, War on Serbia, Built on Lies, and Ireland's involvement in America's imperialist wars, provides examples of media lies which I believe serve only to promote war. The Western media, on behalf of its military industrialist bosses, floods the globe with one-sided warmongering, anti-Syrian, and during the 1990s, anti-Serbian propaganda in order to promote US-led military attacks on those states. False flag operations have been devised and carried out by foreign mercenary contractors hired by the American, British, Israeli regimes to further demonize the enemy and to justify US-led imperialism. The ultimate goals being to install US puppet regimes, gain control of the currency, and to rob the natural resources of the enemy states. As Stephen Landman asks in his article, False Flag Chemical Weapons Attack on Syria, Pretext for All-Out War. Global Research, August 2013. Quote, false flags are an integral part of covert US military intelligence operations, deliberate gross distortions of the truth used especially as a propaganda tactic. Official stories are false, they're contrary to reality, they turn truth on its head and point fingers in the wrong way. They're pretexts for militarism, wars, mass killing and destruction, occupations, domestic repression, and other extremist nationalist security state measures, end quote. If the people would like a copy of the websites that give the full articles to the various headings I've quoted, I have them, copies of them, if they want them. Who really fired on protesters and triggered the war in Syria? Please watch the video Manufacturing Dissent, The Truth About Syria by Lizzie Phelan and her team, published in January 2013. The film shows clearly agents other than the Syrian government forces firing on protesters in Syria in March 2011. A Tale of Two Security Headquarters, The Syrian Intelligence War by Madia Darius Nazaroya, August 2012, quote, teams of CIA and Israeli Mossad agents were behind the recent bombings that hit Syrian cities of Damascus and Aleppo. The mainstream media, in terms of that scholar, what scholar Edward Said said, image-making experts, also played a supportive role in the US-sponsored siege of Damascus. Mairead Maguire, Nobel Peace Prize laureate from Belfast in the north of Ireland, travelled to Syria and Lebanon in September 2013, where she interviewed refugees from Syria. They all said that they had been forced to flee their homes by the anti-Syrian government foreign mercenaries, forces attached to Al-Qaeda in this proxy war. Syria had provided sanctuary to millions of refugees from Iraq, Palestine, and Libya over the years. And just to give the title of the video, I think it's very worthwhile watching. It's called Leaked Documents, US-Framed Syria in Chemical Weapons Attack, August 2013. This video shows definitive evidence to support this claim that explains the US and NATO's motive for committing such an atrocity. Yugoslavia, Serbia, and Montenegro. In 1991, American public relations company Rudolf Finn was hired by the Croatian government to manufacture and disseminate anti-Serb propaganda. This was done with the collusion of Western media outlets. In 1992, the Bosnian government and Albanian separatists hired Rudolf Finn to create lies against the Serbs, which were broadcast through the Western media, and the source being the US State Department. Also, the information is on the website stormfront.org. Despite such a campaign, the truth has begun to emerge, finally. And contrary to PR firms' media version of events regards the war in former Yugoslavia, Serbia did not invade Bosnia, the Serbs did not invade Kosovo, Serb forces did not commit a massacre in Kosovo, and I'd ask you to refer to the article Kosovo Massacre Fraud by Germany to Justify Yugoslav War, February 2012. The other report being the Finnish experts find no evidence of Serb massacre of Albanians. Thanks very much. January 2001. UN reports show Serbian forces did not rape as a weapon of war. Again, contrary to Western media reports, Serb forces did not snipe at civilians in Sarajevo. They did not bomb the bread queue in Sarajevo in 1992, or the market in Sarajevo, both in 1994 and 1995. These atrocities were carried out as false flag operations by special forces operating for NATO. The Serbs did not run concentration camps in Bosnia. If anybody would like a little bit of material to verify what I'm saying here, just please ask me. And there's another thing, the gentleman earlier was talking about Srebrenica and how hard it is to get around what the Western media was saying about that situation. That UN reports show that Serbian forces didn't use rape as a weapon of war. And also, the UN has documented the destruction of 72 Serbian villages in 1992 in Srebrenica neighborhood by NATO-sponsored Bosnian so-called Muslim forces. Very few people survived the onslaught of these murderers. This was a secret war, and who in the West at that time had heard of Srebrenica, or even Bosnia? And I'll just go back to my other paper here. There are other reports too that about the Srebrenica situation. If anybody would like copies of, I'd be very happy to send them to them, email or by post, and it'll really turn around anything that the Western media might have said about that situation. The US war against Yugoslavia, Serbia, as with the war against Syria, Iraq, Libya, was planned well before the Western media began to give its version of events regards the Balkans in 1991, for example. The National Security Directive, US policy towards Yugoslavia, was issued by the White House, Washington, D.C. in 1984. The document outlined a policy to forge a new Balkan order that was based on the market organization of economies and envisaged spheres of influence for the major powers. To implement this policy, America instigated a decade of sanctions against Yugoslavia, simultaneously creating and supporting opposition forces with funds and equipment, and launched in 1999 a 78-day bombing blitz as an attempt to effect regime change, which would result in a compliant and pro-market government in Serbia. Secondly, the war against Yugoslavia was conducted on behalf of the great powers because Yugoslavia stood in the way of their interests. It stood as an obstacle to the goals of the new world oppressors, the new colonialism. It represented a bad example for all those countries and peoples who wished to stay free and independent. President Slobodan Milosevic, the 17th of October, 2002. The war against Serbia was not an act of humanitarian intervention. It was an act of terror and piracy on the part of the NATO powers. Please refer the massive oil reserves of Kosovo, the Balkan Kuwait. Voice of Russia, May 2000. There was a big exploration of the oil potential in Kosovo. I think it was carried out by BP, and there's a big report on that if anybody would like a copy of that as well. And there's more on this subject in my written submission to do with the huge mineral resources also of Bosnia. From Bosnia to Syria, provoking NATO interventions with false flag operations. Global Research, August 2013. Neutral Ireland's involvement in US-led imperialist wars. The horrendous, devastating programme of austerity imposed on the people of Ireland by unelected EU commissioners and global banks has resulted in thousands upon thousands of people in Ireland falling into mortgage arrears, and this does not take into account the huge number of home repossessions which have taken place in the past few years in Ireland. The austerity programme has brought about mass job losses, huge pay cuts, and mass emigration. At the same time, stopover services for American troops through Shannon Airport in the west of Ireland has cost the Irish people over €4 million per year in policing arrangements and the use of Irish Defence Forces to provide additional security and air traffic subsidies. The US military has a permanent presence in Shannon Airport. And as my friend here, Ed, mentioned earlier, that over 2 million American troops en route to wars in Afghanistan and Iraq have passed through Shannon Airport in the last 8 or 9 years or so. During the horrific, illegal 78-day NATO bombing of Serbia in 1999, NATO warplanes used Irish air facilities en route to kill people and destroy the infrastructure of Serbia. Just a little bit more. The latest example of Ireland's collusion in US-EU imperialist actions appears in a report by John Catalanto titled US Officials Caught in Ukrainian Plot, 13th of February 2014, which mentions, for one, Irish neoliberal politician Patrick Cox, giving full support to the fascist, self-installed government in Kiev.
Excuse me, June, time is up.
I've got 2 lines to go, please. By stark contrast, I won't be a minute, sorry everybody. By stark contrast, 79-year-old peace activist Margareta D'Arcy is serving a 3-month prison sentence in Ireland for taking non-violent action to stop US warplanes landing at Shannon Airport. Margareta is undergoing treatment for cancer and also suffers from Parkinson's disease. And we hope that Margareta, all going to plan, she should have been released from prison in Ireland today. Just one more little line, please, if I may. The Red Sea poll. Over 3/4 of Irish people believe Ireland should have a policy of neutrality, according to a Red Sea poll commissioned by the Irish Peace and Neutrality Alliance in September 2013. Roughly 8 out of 10 people believe Ireland should not support military intervention in Syria without a UN mandate, nor should Ireland support rebels in Syria. The people of Ireland have never sanctioned foreign military use of Irish facilities. Thank you very much. Sorry to go over time. Thank you.